So I'm Aurélie, so it's A-U-R-E-L-I-E, so it's my sign. I come from France, in the northern part of France called Lille. And I work in an organization called sens. So I want to say thank you to both partners. I want to say thank you to Hannah for being the first one. So I know it seems complicated to organize, so we need to get tips from you afterwards. So we are not a museum. So we are a bit different organization. We are a non-profit organization. So what do we do? Our goal is to have deaf people access to knowledge and culture in France, but larger, as you can imagine. And we like innovating, and we try to create things that can be used by many people, not only deaf people, but also hearing people, people with maybe other disabilities, going towards universal design if it's possible. So why do we choose to work with deaf people in France? In France, the situation is complicated for deaf people. More than 50% of deaf people cannot read. So you can imagine all the difficulties in daily life, at work. I mean, even finding work and going to college is difficult. French Sign Language has been forbidden in schools for many years. And now you can teach in sign language in schools, but it's been only 6 years. So deaf people have been using sign language, but never been really taught sign language. So there's a lot of work to do here too. So it's hard for deaf people to get access to higher education, and it's difficult to find a job. So we have more than 50% of deaf people in France that are unemployed. So situation is complicated, but fortunately there was a law in 2005 about access for all kinds of disabilities, and it says that public places, schools, museums, city halls, everything has to be accessible by 2015. But it doesn't say what we should do. It just says we have to do this, but it has to be accessible, but it doesn't say what it is to be accessible for deaf people. So mainly in France they've been working on access for people in wheelchair, because it's already a big thing for us, because we have old buildings and we have stairs everywhere. So they've been working on that, and they've been putting a lot of money to get access, at least for wheelchair, but for deaf people it's still on the way. Usually, we've met a lot of museums, and they don't really know what to do for it. So I brought a map. So we're at the very top. So it's supposed to be very cold, but it's not as cold as here. So we were founded in 2003. So nobody in the organization has someone deaf in his family. Usually people ask us, do you have parents, deaf parents? But no, it's just the creator is called Simon. And well, he met a deaf person when he was volunteering in a festival. And he said, well, what can I do? What can I propose to have children, mixing children, deaf and hearing children? And he realized there wasn't not much to do, so he decided to create the organization in 2003, and I joined in 2005. So we are now 10 people working at the organization, so we are growing fast, full-time people, and we have a lot of people that are working on projects. We have deaf guides, we have people for videos, and people for drawing, actually. So we are big team. So we have some kind of principle, trying to have deaf people work and being at every step of the project. from the idea to the end, try to work with networks, and we realized that's the way to do it, and that's how we get deaf people to come to activities. And we try to evaluate everything we do, so with surveys and interviews to see if what we do is really good or not, or whatever we can change. So we've been doing a lot of things. So the first activity of the organization is publishing books and DVDs for children. So it's always the book and the DVDs are related, always. So we have 8 books and DVDs. And the first idea was to have a book and a DVD that could be used in a family that mixing deaf and hearing people, so that everybody can play with the same object. So to have parents relate to children and to brothers and sisters. Let me show you an example. This is from this book. It's called Once Upon a Time, so you have characters from fairy tales. So in the book you have just the word, drawing, and then like something like it gets to go this way. You can see how it goes this way only in the DVD. I'll show you a video. It's visual translation. French word. Does music, but so it's for small kids, but really children. But as you see, we try to work on images, like how we can do something more than black curtain, deaf people signing, something very visual. And half the people that buy the books are just hearing people that are not related to deaf people. So just for the visual part of it. So we created it coming from the experience with deaf people, but we see it's working with people that are more visual than text, and it's really interesting. So that's the part about books. We also have the second activity is something new. The name is Elix. That's the sign. It's it's a social network in French Sign Language. So because our problem is having access to the meaning of the words for French deaf people. So we worked on a dictionary. So, for example, here you have the word storytelling. So you have the definition in French, and then it's translated in French Sign Language. So the definition is translated, not the word. But because yes, maybe it's the same thing in other languages, you have several signs for the same thing in different parts of the country, or young people and older people. So the thing is that people can join the social network, and they can send their signs with their webcam. So all the signs are on the website. You can see different signs for the same word in different parts of France. Like for mom and dad, you have maybe 5 or 6 different signs. Several ones. So it's interesting to, on ordinary words, usually you have something in common. But when you're working with, at work with very special words, working in arts, working in medicine, deaf people sometimes have to make up signs. But they do the same thing in the hospital in Lille, in the hospital in Lyon, in Paris. And they don't have a lot of time to meet and share. With this, they can share their signs and agree on something or not agree. So they can use it, and people can vote as well. So that's the one I use. So you can vote, and so the one that is voted goes up the list. So it's been a huge project working. So we've opened it. Well, we said that everybody, well, it's ready, but now we're working on collecting signs from deaf professionals. So deaf people working in hospitals, working in arts with deaf guides. So because they are the people that use this specific signs all the time. So we're getting their signs. And then we'll hope next year we'll have a big opening to the public. But now we have to have, because this translation is done by deaf translators, they're professionals, and so it takes a lot of time to translate the dictionary. So they're doing something like 60 definitions a week, which is good reason, but next year we have 8,000 definitions. So we can open, and so people, when they get on the website, they will find what they're looking for. Now it's kind of empty. And all the cultural activities we've been doing. So we've been doing a lot of bilingual storytelling for kids. So it's always one deaf actor and one hearing one, but they're not separated. It's how they can play together and show that both languages can mix. So, for example, if in the tale someone has to hide behind a tree, one will be the tree and the other one will hide behind. They try to share and do something funny and accessible for both. And we've been working with deaf guides in museums for the last 3 years. So, what do we do in museums? So we have what we call it a service of deaf museum guides. Just instead of asking an interpreter to come for a visit, we tell museums, ask our service of deaf guides, and we'll train them to go to make the visits in your museum. We also have a lot of videos in sign language for museums. So we sell videos for websites or video guides. I don't know what's the name. Like and we're trying new experiments with ICT. I will show you. So about the deaf educators, our goal is to, for deaf people to have high quality tools in sign language with deaf professionals. And it's also to have deaf people come to the museum, which is an important part as well, is how we communicate so that people want to come to the museum, which is not always easy. You probably all experience that. And it's also important to train the deaf guys as well, because they all, we have 4 different deaf guys. They all have been studying at university, arts, or working with kids, but they, like anybody, they need training for this specific exhibition because it's more in detail than what they've learned before. So we are doing something like 25 tours a year with 300 visitors. So we've been the kids were working fine. And we have different themes, arts, architectures, natural sciences, with a lot of sciences and arts mainly. So how did it begin? So there was another organization very close to a place called Trèfle. It's an organization that Françoise has been created. It was about culture, accessible to deaf people, and also mixing deaf and hearing people. So we had Simon, the founder of the organization, had one experience at the Louvre doing a workshop there for deaf people, and big French museums in Paris have money for accessibility, but they didn't really know what to do for deaf people. So they had deaf guides, but not that many people coming to the visits. So it was a bit disappointing. So we said if they don't find a way, they have a lot of deaf people in Paris. So what can we do in our smaller region? So we said, it needs to be deaf guides, but it cannot be one deaf guide at each museum. It wouldn't make sense. So we said, let's have a group of deaf guides and have them intervene in museums several times a year. So Françoise was already doing visits, but she was volunteer all the time. She met the museum, tried to come with an interpreter, convince them to make a visit, then do the training.
Can you go back a bit?
Oh,
You said Françoise was working as a guide?
Yes, she was working as a guide, but as a volunteer. She did everything from meeting the museum to doing the tour. So it was a lot of work, and mostly museum didn't want to pay for that. But they were happy to have deaf people coming, but they didn't want to pay for. So we met, and we said, well, what can we do together? So we are kind of good with finding funds and subsidies. So we said, we can take that part, all the coordination, meet the museums, organizing all the schedules, having you paid for the work you're doing, all this stuff. And Trèfle has 4 guys. So we're on the kind of coordination, administration stuff. So that's what I've been doing in the last 3 years. And all the communication and marketing. So to have deaf people come, we created videos in sign language. So we'd send them by email, by Facebook. So I meet a museum. They agree, we do at least a minimum 3 tours on one exhibition, because it's a lot of work to to learn everything. So we meet the museum, they agree, we sign the contract. Then there's the training part. So the one or several guides go to the museum. There's one guide from the hearing guide from the museum, and we bring interpreters and someone with our camera to video record the training. So it lasts 2-3 hours, sometimes more. It's today. So the deaf guide is learning about the exhibition, can ask questions to the guide, can know what the questions that people usually ask, so she can prepare. And then she goes back home with a DVD. a few days later with the DVD, so she can watch again the training, because she doesn't have time to watch the interpreter, watch the artworks and take notes. So DVD is like taking notes for her. So we made a deal with the interpreter so that we don't have to pay extra for video because it's just notes. And then we find we're going to have one group coming from a school and then 2 on Sundays. It's just open. We make the videos and posters we send to associations and deaf people. And then they make reservation and come to the museum. So usually the average is 12 to 15 people coming to each tour. So we're happy about that, because if you have larger audiences, it's hard for the deaf guy. So usually Françoise has something, us too, and she goes up and so I think what are the key factors of success, that we are training the deaf guys all the time on the exhibition, so they have it's part of their training, so they know what they're talking about. And the important part is networking, marketing videos, calling schools, because, well, in France there's one big school in our place, in Arras, and so we can, but they are from kids to 18, so we can organize groups with different teachers. But in my part of around Lille, it's like groups of 5 or 6 children in an ordinary school. So we need to call each school. So it's a lot of organizing, as you can imagine. But that's interesting, because we have even we have classes that don't use a lot of sign language, but they still come to our visit. We try to convince them that it's a good experience for them. So, because in Lille, really, like the kids are like half a day off with a deaf educator. Excuse me, please. Around my place, the kids have half a day with a deaf just. So the rest of the time they are using oral and mixing things, mixing languages. So sometimes they're scared of coming to the visit. They won't understand, but that's the role of the guide. They have to adapt. So have to be very visual, take their time. So I've been scared a couple of times, because when I met the class, I was like, oh my God, how are we going to do? Because sometimes you have one who's really good with sign, one that almost doesn't use it. So it's, I mean, I just say congratulations to the guys for that. So that's the part with guides. And so the third part with museum is what we do with multimedia and trying to experiment things. So last year, so just last December, we did an experiment in a museum in Paris, which is called Quai Branly, just like this one. It's in there. It's a museum where you have objects from Africa, from Asia. So small museum with objects and costumes, and really nice place. And so they were a partner in the project. So we've been doing videos for the DVDs, as you saw. So now we just said, what can we do in museums? Create something that can be for kids, 8 to 12, but for deaf kids, but also for hearing kids. So there's sign language, but there's also subtitles and voiceover. Trying to show them we can do something that can be accessible, it can be used, and that hearing people can also have fun with it. So we had like 80 kids coming, 80 deaf kids. So they could prepare in class. So they had the teacher got a file to prepare the kids to come to the museum, and there are 2 videos. One explaining what is the museum, the Quai Branly Museum, and another one explaining, introducing to Laurent, the deaf actor and the activity. So this is our... So there were two parts in the project. One part was a game on iPad in the collection, to discover the collection of the museum. So you can see there was a group of 3 or 4 children with one iPad, and they have to discover the museum with it. And the other part was a workshop in a classroom, down in a museum, and they had to try several things. So the first activity in the classroom was they had exotic fruits, and they had to make up signs for them. So it was really simple with webcams. So they had never seen those fruits. So it was funny to see how they did something very visual and iconic. The second game was like you all know the Wii. So it was the same thing. You had a big screen, a webcam under, and the kids had to select stuff like this, and they could see themselves on the screen at the real time. And so they had to reproduce something they had seen in the museum. They were creating powders or something. So they had to choose the elements and do all the miming at the same time. So it was fun because they were seeing themselves at the same time doing the things. So that was an interesting activity. And the third one was a big touchscreen. And in the museum they had seen either Asia or Australia. And so they had to create a landscape from that part of the world. So they could click and select houses, animals, people, costumes, etc. And they could just create the landscape. At the end, put their names and print it, and get back home with the landscape. So, and there could be several people at the same time. It was multi-touch. So it was funny because some did things together, some just didn't. And most of the time they were just playing with the screen, but not really trying to reproduce the landscape. Because I guess it was the first time with a touch screen, so I mean that was part of the experiment. So some things work less than others. Maybe I can show you. So the iPad activity really worked well. It was 35 to 40 minutes. So they had 4 objects to discover in the museum and learn about it. And it was very funny. We tried with hearing children, and they just loved it and never asked a question about it, something using sign language on it. That was interesting because we were like, maybe they won't like it, or they will ask a question, why is he using his hand? Not any questions, they were just playing like the deaf kids. So I'll show you an example. And I have the game with me, so if you want a break, you can play with it too. Let's multi-touch. Select. They have to select where the population lives, what it looks like. You had the red sign, it was the red animal. you can see the whole video. It's 5 minutes, so I won't show it, but I'll show you itself. So that's it's a famous deaf actor in France. So all the kids, when they get in the museum, they ask him, "Where is it? Where is it?" And I'm like, well, it's not quite here. It's on the video. So this is the one who created the organization. And that's what it looks like. That's what you see on the iPad. What's the web. So basically, that looks like this. So it speaks in French.
Je suis Laurent. J'aimerais apprendre un nouveau métier, ethnologue.
So subtitles, voice,
J'ai reçu une
sign
lettre.
language.
À l'intérieur, il y avait 4 cartes images
So trying to have, it's like
qui
a
représentent des objets.
ethnologist. It has to go to the country, but he has to take his exams. But he has a few things he has forgotten. So the kids have to help him in the museum find information and tell him. So they have to find
Avez-vous ces 4 cartes?
the objects. So there's usually a video and then a menu. And so, for example, here they had to find the name of the population. They have the object. They have to find the name of the population. So kids have to. Well, the goal was to have them discover that you can use the text. I don't know what's the name in English. Lado or something at the bottom of the label. Yeah. So they have to find. So they have to discover how a museum works at the same time. So they have to try. And so they get it first time or not.
Vous êtes sûr que vous avez trouvé?
You sure you found?
Je ne crois pas.
I'm not sure. You're
Cherchez
right.
encore et réessayez.
And try again. So. Now in this part you have a sculpture with 3 different parts. You have a woman, a bird, and a crocodile. So the kids have to look at the sculpture and see the 3 different parts, and then put it just this way. Let's try. One is good for me. So what was interesting is that the kids were
Vous avez réussi.
collaborating to find the
J'ai
answers.
une maison surprenante. Regardez.
And so we used images from the museum as well. We asked conservators to give us images. information because we don't know anything about ethnology or Asia or anything. So they gave us everything, and Simon tried to imagine like a treasure hunt, but the treasure is an artwork or an object. And then when we decided about what we want to do, we asked the person in charge of this population to say, well, it's right, you didn't say anything wrong, and everything's good. And then we did all the video and everything. And then we have the deaf kids to come to the museum from 8 to 12. So kids from Paris, so it was new for us. So we get contact with the deaf schools in Paris. So it's interesting because the iPad is what most people really loved it. People from the museum, the deaf kids, even deaf adults just loved it. So we think we get to develop that part. And the museum would like to have it, but not for deaf people. They would just they want to have it for families. So that would be huge for us, having something just for families, but sign language is at the middle of the thing. So they're looking for the money to have it, but I think they will. It's a big museum, so. So I can tell you more later, but we worked on evaluation of this iPad activity. So we worked with a university close to Lille. So there were two groups of deaf kids using the iPad, and one group following a deaf guide, your ordinary visit, but with the same content. And it's really interesting to see that with the video they're really focused and they participate a lot and collaborate. It's easy to use, we don't have to explain anything to the kids. It was really natural.
Excuse me, there are two groups. What did you say?
Okay, there were two groups of the deaf kids with the iPad, and one group of deaf kids doing this same thing but with a deaf guide. But the same information. And so it was very collective activity. It was not just listening, they were exchanging a lot. So we we counted eye contact with between kids and from kids to the iPad and with a lot of time and stuff. And so the kids at the end had to draw, there was smileys, and well, they all loved that thing. It was a small group, but they really liked it. But there still has a few things to improve, especially sometimes they were spending too much time on the iPad and not enough looking at the objects. So that's the thing about it. But we had two, one in Asia and one in Australia. And in one of them, we asked the kids to look at the artworks, and that worked fine. So if we have to do some new ones, we do the same. In the video, tell the kids to look and find information on the object. But they were very focused, and then we asked them to draw what they remembered, anything. And the one using the iPad drew many more objects than the other one they're using with the deaf guide. And objects were more related, almost all were related to the iPad. The other kids drew things they had seen in class, or other things in the museums, but that were not related to the visits. So that's interesting stuff to do. I mean, working with video doesn't replace having a guide. I mean, we all agree on that, because you can ask questions and everything, but maybe a new way to visit a museum. So like for example, this so they drew the iPad. So there were two friends. So one did, and these costumes we never explained them, but that's what they drew because they were close to them, and I guess they didn't look at the guy; they just looked around. And they were, it's funny how they drew the labels. So that's what we've been doing. So if you want to see more, or just ask. And I can, Françoise can tell you about, shortly about her experience with us, because she's one of the deaf guys. She's a leader in our group. Oh, sorry, I'm going to do the translation. Sorry, I'm just... Okay, I'm not an interpreter, so I'll do my best, promise. Okay, Aurélie is not an interpreter, but she knows sign language. We've been exchanging for years, so she'll be okay. So my sign is Françoise, and why is this sign? When I was young, I was just bored and I just bit my nails all the time. So that's why it stayed. So they gave me that sign. The first thing I want to say is thank you. Thanks a lot using the Norwegian sign. Thanks to Aurélie. It's been a pleasure. That she's invited me to come here. I'm so happy. It's the first time I'm traveling for professional reasons. I've been traveling a lot, but not for professional reasons. I'm very happy. And also I want to say thank you to Anna, who's been taking us everywhere with the snow yesterday in the mountains. It was really nice. I just loved it. Thank you. I'm going to start. Well, I'm deaf. I grew up deaf. I was born deaf in school. When I went out of school, I worked in a school as well. When my first job was in a school, teaching to children, teaching them drawing and arts. Well, from 12 to 20, well, that's what the age of the kids she was teaching to, from 12 to 20. Drawing, but also history of art history. I was using a lot of PowerPoint images. I try to inform them about arts and open their minds. Just, it was tough, but it was important for me. And now work is finished. She transferred her job to another deaf person in the school, and she gave her the position so that she can teach arts now. So she has something taking her job. So she's retired, but she's not just doing nothing. She's been partnered with us. She's been reading and studying a lot, doing a lot of videos and editing videos. She loves it. And she has been doing that for many years, so she's still doing it.